I don't have a song for you this month. I have been singing a song at the intro of every Nostalgia Lane the last 3 months, but this month I got nothing. So don't worry about that. Just come walk with me. Come walk with me down Nostalgia Lane. Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. This is Nostalgia Lane, May 2022 edition, and this month I will be reviewing The Shawshank Redemption from 1994. So, Nostalgia Lane is a monthly series of videos in which I rewatch a film from my past, something that I would have really loved when I was younger, but have not seen in a very long time. So I want to revisit it, rewatch it, and see what I think of it now. And this month, I am doing Shawshank Redemption, which is a film that I saw a gazillion, trillion, billion times in the 90s, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So in case you're not familiar, I'll go through the format very quickly. Part 1, I will briefly tell you why I chose the film for Nostalgia Lane. Part 2, I will talk about what I thought of the film when I first saw it and why I really loved it. And then Part 3, I will talk about what I thought of it after my recent rewatch, after not having seen it for a very long time. And then part 4 will be my rating out of 10 based on my rewatch, not based on what I would have thought of it back in the day, and just based on what I think of it now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about The Shawshank Redemption, starting with part 1. Part 1, why I decided to do this film for Nostalgia Lane and revisit it after all this time. Well, I wanted to get out of the 80s, as I said last month. Like, I was tired of doing the 80s, so I wanted to get into the 90s and forward of the 90s. And, I don't know, at some point I ran across The Shawshank Redemption somehow, and I was like, oh my god. Well, I have to do that. Like, I saw it so many times, but it has been, I don't know when the last time I watched it was, guessing roughly 20 years. So, once I decided, well, I gotta do films from the 90s and 2000s, then, I mean, like, this was an obvious choice. So there's really not much more to it than that. So, without any more jibber jabber, let's move right on over to part 2, what I thought of the film when I first saw it. So, what did I think of the film back in the 90s? So, it came out in 1984. I did not see it at the theater. I would have first seen it on cable, HBO, or Showtime, or Cinemax, or whatever, one of those things. And as I have mentioned in many other Nostalgia Lane videos, the thing that we used to do is record films off of cable television onto a VHS tape so that we then could watch it whenever we wanted, because back in my day we didn't have these HBO Max streaming services, or we can just watch a movie anytime we want. So that's how we got around that. We would record them onto VHS tape and watch them whenever we wanted. And this one we watched over and over and over, and it was during this time period, 95, I think mostly 96 into the beginning part of 97. For me, this was towards the end of my college days, and then after I graduated college, and then before I moved across the country to Oregon for the first time in the summer of 97. So during that time period, all we did was basically deliver pizzas, make a ton of money, because the gas was like $1.25 a gallon, and make a ton of money, spend most of it on weed and beer, and party all the time. So that's what my life was like during those days. And I don't know, my parents' house was the hangout house for all my friends, because my parents kind of didn't care, and they're like, whatever. So we always had my friends always hanging out, so our favorite thing to do was smoke a bunch of weed and watch Shawshank Redemption over and over. And there were a few of us who were really, really into it. And then there's some of my friends were just like, Shawshank Redemption again? Can't we watch something else? We watched it so many times, and I loved this film so much. And thinking about what really drew me to the film, why I just could not get enough of it, and why I just had to watch it over and over and over again, and probably a couple of my friends were also feeling that way, watching it over and over again. I can't speak for them, but for me, it was several things. One, I always got pumped up with the big reveal of Andy Dufresne's plan. It was so satisfying, because the first time I saw it, I didn't see it coming. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It was right there under our noses the whole time, right there under the warden's nose the whole time, and the warden gets exactly what he deserves. And it was so satisfying. It was such a yes moment. I was so happy with it, and I could just watch it over and over again and still get pumped up by it. But it wasn't just that. I was discovering the Grateful Dead and Fish and smoking a lot of weed and, listening to doing some hippy dippy stuff and, smudging the sage and, all that sort of, I was getting into the hippie stuff. So I really appreciated the beauty of this film and how people can find beauty in the darkest of places and in the darkest of people as well. And not just beauty, of course, there's the theme of hope. There's that discussion that Andy Dufresne has with, I want to just say Morgan Freeman, but it's Red is the character's name. Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins have a discussion about hope, and which is paid off beautifully at the end with Morgan Freeman's narration, where he's like, I hope I get to see my friend again. I hope that we can hook up again, or whatever. I hope. And then he just ends with, I hope. And it's so beautiful. So I always appreciated the beauty of the film. Of course, there was the scene with the Italian singers where Tim Robbins, Andy Dufresne, locks himself in the room and puts the record on the loudspeakers, and it's just this opera singers, and he's just sitting back, letting it play, and Morgan Freeman's narration, again, this is like, I don't know what those Italian ladies were singing. I would like to think of it. It was so good. And by the way, Morgan Freeman's narration, I mean, come on. That's right, folks. You've tuned into Nostalgia Lane for in-depth analysis on films. In-depth analysis. Morgan Freeman's. There's a reason why there's been so many memes made about Morgan Freeman's narration. And this is, of course, the all-time classic of that. And I can't understate how good Tim Robbins was and how much I really loved him as an actor at the time, especially also a little bit later after this. He was in a movie called Bob Roberts that I would also like to really revisit. It wouldn't be a nostalgia lane because it's not one that I saw a million times or anything like that, but I kind of want to revisit that one too. He was in a lot of good films. Tim Robbins, always really respected him as an actor, so of course the acting was always a big thing for me as well, but there was so much to love about this film, and it just moved me every time, and it took a long time for me to get sick of it. A few of my friends were sick of it way before I was. They were like, do we have to watch this again? Let's watch something. I remember one time we watched Pocahontas because people were tired of watching Shawshank Redemption. I was like, can we turn this off and watch Shawshank Redemption? I don't want to watch Pocahontas. Racist movie. Anyways, I eventually did get sick of it. It took me a long time. And I think that's why I didn't watch it for 20 years, because I did get tired of it. I memorized the film backwards and forwards, and after a while, it was like, it started to finally lose a little something. So it's like, okay, maybe I won't watch it for another 20 years. And here I am, 20 years later, revisiting it once again. And so now let me segue into part 3 and talk about my thoughts on the film after my rewatch. Okay, now we move to part 3, what I think of the film now. But actually, before I dive into that, just a quick correction, because as I was thinking about this, I remembered I don't think The Shawshank Redemption was one of the films that we recorded off the cable. I actually think my parents bought the movie. Like, I think my mom owned it. Now that I think about it, I didn't feel like going back and re-recording that whole segment all over again just to correct that. So I'm just going to throw that in there if you care. I actually think that my parents owned that movie. Anyways, so now what did I think of it now that I can just click on the HBO Max and watch it whenever I want? Mostly ditto, like everything that I felt when I first saw it. This is not a film that really surprised me upon my rewatch. There was nothing in it that was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that, which is usually the case for most Nostalgia Lane reviews. But this one, I saw it so many times, I think I still pretty much have it memorized. Like, I don't have all of the lines memorized anymore, but nothing was new to me. Like, it definitely felt like a film that I have seen literally hundreds of times. I said gazillions and billions, but I think hundreds is probably actually literally accurate. So even though it's been like 20 years since I last saw it, it's still a film that was very, very familiar to me. And yet I still re-experienced all of the same feelings. The beauty of seeing the opera scene again, just getting to re-experience all of this stuff. And of course the sadness, I didn't mention, there's the sadness as well, with, of course, the character of Brooks killing himself. That's pretty dark. But the fact that even after that, the other characters are able to find hope in something. It's just a really beautiful film. So I really thoroughly enjoyed going back and re-experiencing it again. And I really don't have anything to add as far as my enjoyment of the film from what I first thought of it back then. Because, as I said, I feel like I've still seen it hundreds of times, even though it's been a while. I did actually get a little bit more bothered by some of the suspensions of disbelief that you have to do for this film that I think I overlooked back then. It's kind of bothered me just a little bit more. Like, there's definitely a lot of like, okay, that would never happen moments that I did overlook. That, I don't know, it was harder for me to overlook. Maybe I just think critically more these days. I don't know. Of course, there's the obvious ones, like the fact that all the prisoners, I mean, not all of them, you've got the sisters or whatever at the beginning, but most of the prisoners are just these good guys. They're just good guys, you know, there's good old boys just hanging out, they're good guys. I don't know how realistic that is for prisons. I mean, granted, I've never been to a prison, let alone in a prison in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, but I don't know, it doesn't feel realistic to me. The fact that Andy Dufresne was able to dig that tunnel with a little teeny rock axe. Red, in the beginning, says that he thinks it would take 600 years. And then the end, he's like, I thought it would take 600 years, but it only took him 19. Yeah, no, it would take 600 years. No, I don't buy it. That's a little far-fetched. A little bit far-fetched. But those bother me less than some of the other things. The big one being Tommy, and I don't know, maybe I'm just a little more cynical these days, but the fact that the warden would see Tommy as a threat. He was worried about Tommy taking the stand and testifying that some random dude in a prison confessed to the crime that Andy Dufresne was convicted of, And the warden saw that as a serious threat. Like, there's any more than a 0% chance that Tommy just wouldn't be laughed off the stand and would be thrown out immediately. Like, maybe I'm just cynical about our justice system, but there is no way that would have amounted to anything. Oh, I am a prisoner who's been in prison his whole life, in and out of prison, and I'm a lifelong criminal, and some random criminal guy in some random prison told me he did what Andy Dufresne is convicted of. And that's going to fly? Yeah, right. That is not going to fly. But, you had to cause some drama and tension. We got to have the warden killing off Tommy in that scene. So you needed it so the movie could happen. But I don't know. The unbelievability of it bothered me a lot more this time than I ever remember it bothering me in the past. Also, there's silly things in there, too, like Andy Dufresne all of a sudden doing the taxes of every prison guard in the county. He's not an accountant. He's a banker. You're telling me there's no accountants anywhere in prison? And when there is an accountant, do they do everybody's taxes too? I mean, I think that was a little silly. But it's just one of those suspension of disbelief moments. So I don't know. I feel like overall those things maybe brought the film down a little bit more than I used to. But overall, still really, really enjoyed the experience of watching this film. Now, one last thing before I jump over to my rating out of 10. If you're not a Star Trek fan, you're going to have to indulge me for a couple minutes, or you can just fast forward to part 4 if you want. But I have to talk about the actors from Star Trek who appear. I was, at this point, a huge Star Trek fan already, obviously, in the 90s. And so the first one, super obvious, the Warden. If you're a Star Trek fan, it's super obvious. The Warden was, of course, in the episode The Wounded of the Next Generation, and as Captain Maxwell. So when I first saw this movie, I was like, hey, it's Captain Maxwell. But now that actor, I think his name is Bob Gungan, something like that. He has been in a million trillion movies. Like, if you go on his Wikipedia page or IMDb page, like, you got to scroll down for 2 hours to get through all of his film and television credits. And he's still going. He's still acting today. He was old in the 90s, and he's still acting today. The most recent thing I think I personally saw him in was Daredevil Season 1, which I actually just saw recently, even though it was out a few years ago. But he's been in many things since then, still going strong. And then there is William Sadler is the actor's name, who obviously plays Sloan in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Sloan of Section 31 fame. If you're not a Star Trek fan, I'm speaking a foreign language to you. Sorry. But I knew he was in it too. Like, I knew these two were in it. But then there's a third surprise one at the end that I had no idea was in this movie. So at the very, very end, when Morgan Freeman is going to his final parole hearing where he gets released, he's sitting down and he's talking to a parole officer, a young white man, and this is Commander Bruce Maddox from Measure of the Man. Again, if you're not a Star Trek fan, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But as a Star Trek fan, I was like, oh, hey, it's Commander Maddox. I didn't know he was in anything else. I had no idea he was in Shawshank Redemption. So only in it for the very, very end in a very brief scene, which, by the way, I did not mention. That was a pretty satisfying scene as well. I really enjoyed everything thoroughly, up from when Andy's plan is revealed all the way up through Morgan Freeman's narration at the very end. And that includes his parole hearing, which I loved that scene as well, when he says, "Redemption? What the hell does that even mean?" And then he finally gets approved. I love that. Anyways, Commander Bruce Maddox. All right, let us now move on to the fourth and final part of this video, where I give my rating out of 10. Okay, now is the time where I give my rating out of 10 based on my rewatch. 1 is the lowest possible score, 10 is the highest possible score, and my rating for the Shawshank Redemption is a 9. So I definitely would have given it a 10 back in the day, for sure. I think I'm a little more bothered by the suspension of disbelief thing, so it's not quite a 10 anymore for me, but I still thoroughly enjoyed revisiting this film quite a lot. So I still absolutely love it. Still a 9 out of 10 for me. So Shawshank Redemption still doing pretty good. And it was very good to see it again. Okay, that does it for this month's edition of Nostalgia Lane. Join me next month. It is Pride Month next month. So I will be doing a very special Pride edition of Nostalgia Lane, where I will be rewatching my personal favorite LGBTQ movie of all time, personally, from 1999, But I'm a Cheerleader, starring Natasha Lyonne. I just found out the other day that this is Natasha Lyonne from Russian Doll. Like, she was hosting Saturday Night Live and she was listing off all of her credits, and she was like, oh yeah, and I was in this cult classic in the 90s called But I'm a Cheerleader. And I was like, you were? And I looked it up. I was like, oh my god, that's her. Like, I had no idea. I just found it out a couple days ago. Anyways, Natasha Lyonne stars in But I'm a Cheerleader. If you have never seen this film, that's your homework. That's your assignment for the next month. Find it and watch it. I believe in the US you can get it for free on Peacock, I think. And if not, you can find it. Definitely worth watching. It is sadly as relevant today as it was back then. It is taking the very serious topic of gay conversion therapy and treating it the way it deserves to be treated, which is to be mocked and ridiculed and shown how ridiculous it is. But it's made into a comedy, and it was friggin' hilarious, or at least I used to think it was. I haven't watched it in a while. It came out in 99. I would have first seen it in probably 2002, 2003-ish. I didn't see it at the theaters. But it's definitely been a while. So I've been really looking forward to watching this for a while. I actually thought of this a couple months ago, and I was like, well, I gotta save it for June. This was Pride Month. But I was like, I really want to watch this movie. So really looking forward to it. Join me for that. And if you've never seen it, watch it in the next month so that you can know what I'm talking about as I review it. I do plan on, for Pride Month, getting into a little bit more depth than I did for this review. So definitely do join me for that. All right, everybody, that's all I got. See you next time. Bye-bye.